All right, I think 25 is a great number to start with. Alexandria, are you ready to go?
Yes, ready to go, Karen.
Awesome, great. So good to see everyone here. Thank you for joining the National Security Innovation Network for our Diversity Unlocks Innovation speaker series. So last month, if you joined us, you know we had Farouk Mita, small business programs, as our guest speaker, who spoke about small business, minority engagement, and looking to inspire growth and create programs and opportunities for small business. And throughout the year, NSIN will be hosting speaker series on innovation, national security, and DE&I topics specific to our mission and our work. So as you may know, NSIN is a problem-solving network in the DoD. Our mission is to build networks of innovators that generate new solutions to national security problems. I encourage all of you to visit nsin.mil to learn more about what we do. I would like to introduce you to our speaker. I'd like to introduce you to a very good friend of mine, Alexandria Maloney. She is a national security DE&I communications strategist who has and continues to build a pipeline infrastructure for the next generation of underrepresented international affairs professionals. Most recently, Alexandria was announced as the Forbes FTC for the Culture 50 champion for Black and Brown communities, alongside leaders like Colin Kaepernick, Issa Rae, and others, for her work as a board member and now president of Black Professionals in International Affairs, and building multiple ecosystems with an organic reach of over 60,000 to educate, prepare, and empower diverse communities to enter international affairs and national security fields. She's also been recognized for her work as a Truman 2021 Rookie of the Year and CISA's DE&I Power 50 leader. She's been featured as a speaker at the United Nations, G20 Civil Society Summit, and a guest lecturer at Cornell University's Institute of Public Affairs. So, you know, we met a while back, and one of the things that I remember that I saw on your LinkedIn page is this question. It's an MLK quote, and it says, what are you doing for others? So I want to ask you, how do you answer that question every single day? What are you doing for others?
Well, firstly, Karen, and to the folks here representing the National Security Innovation Network, thank you so much for having me on as today's speaker. I'm really excited for today's conversation and Q&A. So so on the top of my LinkedIn, I have an MLK quote that asks me, what am I doing for others? And I put that there really as a reminder for myself that no matter what I'm doing professionally in my journey, wherever I am and wherever I'm housed, that my efforts are impacting others and serving others in our larger community. So whether that's in my day job, whether I'm with Department of Defense or Truman National Security Project, now as their senior membership manager, or in my outreach efforts with Black professionals in international affairs, Diversity and National Security Network, other organizations in our field, really shaping what I do around that question and hopefully inspiring others to see it that way too, that we're more than just our professional title, but it's what is the impact that we're doing and that we hope to do and that we're trying to do. I see you're muted, Karen.
You know, I feel like I say that at least once or twice a day as standard. So what does a career in international affairs mean?
Oof. Such a big question. I don't want to be cliche and say it can mean almost anything. But any aspect of our professional, our life, our workforce, our society has an international aspect to it, an international dimension. So whether that's public sector, government, private sector, business, nonprofit, philanthropic, all of these have a international and can have an international not only element, but implications. So I think there's so much that is comprised in the international affairs space. APSIA has a really good career matrix for different international affairs organizations.
Okay, you say APSIA, an acronym means?
Yep, so APSIA is the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs.
And you engage with them how?
So we're friends. They're partners with BPIA when we do different career fairs and graduate fairs. They have a pretty large student, network that they serve, who students are in attendance at the schools that are connected to that network. So really, they have a lot of great resources for students and graduate students who are interested in international affairs graduate programs.
Okay, so I'm building up to paint a picture. So what inspired you to explore a career in international affairs, and then particularly to include government?
Yes. So I knew that I always wanted to serve and be in a public service kind of role. 3 out of 4 of my grandparents are military veterans. So I had that kind of exposure through their stories and through their life to what it means to serve, what it means to be a person of color and serve during a very interesting historical time, but still having the value and the honor to be able to serve the nation that you were born and reside in. So for me, I knew that I loved speaking to and connecting with other folks of different backgrounds. That was always something that kind of came natural to me, socializing, wanting to learn from others who are different than me. And I think over time, that initial kind of very personal aspect to my interest in the international space and interacting with international communities has manifested in this way of what work can I contribute to or build, if need be, that helps build bridges and creates the environments for our field, whether that be in the government space, the defense space, or in the outreach, the community-based organization, and the grassroots space at large, to move forward together in our field in terms of what progress looks like and having an inclusive field.
So one of the things I said in the beginning of what NSIN's mission is our mission is to build networks of innovators that generate new solutions to national security problems. As we have been progressing over the years, that mission actually can be tweaked to say, and we don't have to say it, but it is recognized that our mission is to build diverse networks or build networks of diverse innovators that generate new solutions to the national security's equally diverse problems. So tell me, why does diversity matter in international affairs, including your aspect when you include also that you are involving government into international affairs? Why does diversity matter?
So why diversity matters in government and our foreign affairs field at large is that there's a level of, let me reframe it. The leaders in our field are tasked with making decisions that will affect and can affect the lives of a number of people all around this world and affect the lives of Americans as well, all Americans. And it's important for our leaders to be able to make well-informed decisions. And by well-informed, I mean have the full view, the full sketch of information, knowledge, perspective, and insights. It's hard to have that if everyone at the table looks the same. So I'm not saying that because having a diverse group does not guarantee that things are going to be, that decisions are going to be made easier, that things are going to naturally flow, right? But learning how to incorporate these difference in perspectives, these different views into our formal decision making and our policy making, I think is vital for sound foreign policy, foreign affairs, military policy recommendations and decisions that are being made. So that's to scratch the surface. I'm sure there's going to be more like in depth.
Absolutely.
I'll start there.
So yesterday, International Women's Day, celebration, global level. Share with me, and still yet another scratching the surface on this, in the areas where you have, represented, made an impact, what other changes have women present day that you've just been around in the places where you have, so many places where you've been? What changes have women made in international affairs on that geopolitical scale? What changes?
That's a big question.
I know.
And I think historically, unfortunately, at least here in the US, a large part of women in the foreign affairs and the government space, we could easily say has taken place over the past maybe 60 years, 50, 60 years, 70 years max, 1950s. So to have that kind of case study or specific cases where we see women who are representing in the heights of government and leadership, when I'm thinking, going back to the beginning, and I think of women as all women of background, color, and so forth, starting from the first African-American woman ambassador, Patricia Roberts Harris, going back to see the timeline of impact that women have had in our field, in seeing, a Condoleezza Rice, Susan Rice, Linda Thomas Greenfield, Bonnie Jenkins, a Gina Abercrombie Winstanley, a number of Avril Haines. So many strong and confident voices in the face of opposition sometimes, in the face of obstacles that we as the outside world may or may not see, I think is a very powerful thing and a very compelling thing when I think of women in leadership in the foreign affairs space and, the government and defense space. So I wish I could say that there were more. I wish I could, pull out a list of hundreds that come to mind. I'm in the field and I'm still learning, which means we all have the opportunity to continue to learn, not only learn, but also, support a diversified, workforce, and not just from the entry and the mid-level, but all the way up through the senior level, through the SCS and through the senior tiers too.
Which takes me to my next question. What is the effort that we all can make to make sure that we do have more in that space?
That's a very good question. I think this is, because to me, this question is at the micro level, the individual level, and at the macro level, right? There are things at the institutional level that our leaders can be doing to ensure or better promote or create an environment that is more open and more conducive to recruiting and retaining diverse leadership, by whether that's race, gender, religion, background, across the board, sexuality, across the board. At the individual level, I like to think of it as, how can I impact or influence my sphere of influence? That's how I like to frame it, because it can be overwhelming to think about this really just massive, complex challenge, multifaceted. There's the amount of things that would be required to get us to the end state of what a fully diverse, fully open, it can be overwhelming. So looking at it from our seats, from where we sit, if we are an analyst at the Department of Defense, what's the workplace climate like in my office? Are we supporting new ideas? Are we supporting and bringing in voices that may be a little quieter, asking them to speak up or bring their contribution in? as, you know, if we're mid-level leaders or professionals, you know, am I ensuring a open line of communication with the team in the office, that folks feel comfortable to say when something may not feel right, or something, or the environment may be, there's an opportunity for the environment to be more open or more inclusive, right? Because I think the challenge that groups of varying demographics face collectively, even though there's different experiences, but the collective, there is one small collective experience. And I think it comes down to exclusion sometimes, the feeling and the reality sometimes of exclusion, right? Feeling that you're not a part of the team, that you don't belong. Not only the team, part of the organization. We're talking organizational cultures, industry cultures, right? So for leaders who are serious about it, right, who prioritize it, there will be the resources and the efforts to do it. It can't just be talk. It can't just be, we want to diversify. We want this to be a diverse and open culture where folks feel open to being here. It's going to take resources. It's going to take experts. And it's going to sometimes take having some pushing systems that may be a little uncomfortable for folks sometimes, but thinking about the end goal in mind, thinking about the generations that will be affected by this work at the end of our time and beyond. So I have a very good friend, Chinadu Nwafor, who is he's a civil rights, social justice activist out of Baltimore, Maryland, kind of well known a little. He says, Alexandria, this work that we do was here before we were born, and it'll be here after we die. A lot of this work that we do, he says, we have to focus on what we can do now to make it better, to look back and say, I've contributed to this cause. I've contributed to an issue that I see as important in this lifetime, with the influence, the proximity, the resources, and the privilege that I've had. So for me, the higher that I go, the things that I'm seeking and the visibility that I'm seeking is to hopefully help shine light more on these issues. It's not about me, right? It's giving more visibility to, opportunities in foreign affairs, or how can we diversify our field? Because the foreign affairs and defense space is a little different than the private sector, than corporate, right? We aren't managing our success off of profit or off of that kind of measurement of success, right? We're dealing in very human-centered challenges, human-centered problem sets, things that can be life or death, right? If we don't have the right information, if we don't have a full set of, perspectives and thoughts on these things, and not only thoughts, but expertise. And there is the expertise there across our field, but are we creating the environment for folks who may have different backgrounds, who have this expertise, to come into defense, to come into government? Or are they, exploring other options in other fields for various reasons? So those are things that our leaders, in our field should be, and not only our leaders, us too, like we're here talking about it as leaders in our field, right? Should be thinking about on these topics.
There's always that challenge of, I don't want to make the first wave. I don't want to stand out. If I say this, if my idea is too novel, what are others going to think? How do you create, what have you done in the positions that you've been in where you say, I'm going to create the opportunity for this, or I'm going to just step out on a limb, I'm going to do this? What does that engagement look like?
Yeah. I'll say I have two experiences with this. So one is, I've been able to identify and find and understand the key stakeholders on things, to understand how to engage them. If there's an appetite, right? If there's no appetite, there's little you can do. I mean, there's little you can do. You can't force somebody to see something the way that you see it. But identifying and engaging the stakeholders, and then having sponsors, having leaders who will kind of advocate and speak on your behalf on certain things, or who will use their positioning and their influence to then push issues forward. And then there's the second one where it's just you out on a limb, where it's Alexandria out on a limb, who's like, I see a challenge and I see a problem set, and I don't think, we're moving fast enough or engaging fast enough or creatively enough in our fields to engage folks in a problem or a challenge that we're having now that's alive, like live, real time, right? Things are happening and are being affected by our lack of preparation in our workforce. So how can I help solve that problem from an individual standpoint? From I'm involved with a few organizations, a few associations standpoint, and then building from there. Because for me, impact work is, you can take a view, a scalable view to it. So whether it's me on a call with 25 people, or whether it's me, in an environment where it's like 25,000 people, it's the same, because I see it like as one individual person, one person here, one person here. If one person from this call today leaves and says, that was interesting, or that was an interesting thought or interesting point, and may carry the conversation somewhere else. To me, that's that kind of like tumbleweed effect of this work, which is largely that social impact work, and using kind of a grassroots creative outlook, what some may consider an unorthodox, non-traditional approach to this work. I'm happy to do it. For me, it's these issues are bigger than my personal ego or the egos of others who may not want to risk their reputation on things like that. I'm going to go speak kind of candidly here, risk their reputation, or have opinions of others that may result, in a personal reflection or something like that. So that's my answer to that question.
It's a challenge, but you're absolutely right. You have to risk it because it is worth it. One of the main things it's so critical, with NSIN is we have to increase the pool of eligible candidates, and so we improve the outreach, eliminate barriers, and we have to have an ensured continuous success as we realign the organizational structure. But it's all about accountability, right? And so, because you're like, as you said, it's not tied to profit, and it's tied to a greater goal. So, all right. So you mentioned something earlier about what you are leaving behind. You say you have a legacy. You are writing this legacy. What does that read like? What does it say?
Oh, that's a very profound question. I hope that my legacy is that others and the generation coming up behind me, of all people, all backgrounds, all colors, and everyone who interacts with myself or the work that I've done, says, I can do it. I can do this. This can be me. Why can't I pursue this? Why, that genuinely is what I hope that what I would like my legacy to be. Also an element of it is, opening doors for folks who don't even know there's a door there, to be honest, Karen. They don't even know there's a house, like, let alone a door. Because we have a bit of a duty to help bring others in, I feel, at least, to help pull up others as we enter indoors. So as we continue to excel on our careers and excel in our professional journeys, we have that duty to bring others and teach and bring others and show them the way too. Because I don't know about you all, but there was time where I'm like, wow, I wish I had a me when I was 21. I wish I had a 31-year-old Alex at 21. So reaching back. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember a moment when you saw a difference for women in international affairs world, and you were like, oh, this is this is a magic moment? Like, do you remember when you saw a change? What do you remember, and how did it impact your work?
Wow. I think that moment for me was when Condoleezza Rice became Secretary of State. From my memory, that was, and I'm sure there was more before, and, you know, Hillary Clinton was very involved politically, but that was the first, and I highly respect Condoleezza Rice. That was the first time I remember seeing, you know, a woman of that profile in that kind of international foreign affairs predominant role like that, and professional, you know, someone you could say, okay, this is a role model, that could be me. That was the first time in my life, and in the lives of many other people who look like me, that could look and say, because we can say it, right? Yeah, anybody can be president, anybody can be Secretary of State, but it's a little easier if none of them have ever looked like you, both in gender, background, demographic, lifestyle, socioeconomic, right? So I remember that really sticking out to me, being like, it is possible, you know, even though I don't speak Russian, like I'm not even at that level yet. I'm not at my Condoleezza level yet, but still like that glimmer of hope there. And there are, you know, a few others too, but that was the moment for me where I was just like, wow.
Yeah, I'm with you there. No, I don't speak Russian. I don't play the piano. I don't have that football knowledge, but I get you. I understand. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that was similar for me and a lot of friends of mine at that time. So I do want to let everyone know that if you do have questions, please do post it in chat, because we are coming in close to some of the final questions here. So tell me, I remember I heard you on the podcast Fed Upward. That was great, because you had Gina Winstanley on there. That was really, really good. So what are some of the podcasts and thought leaders that you are listening to like now?
Shout out to Fed Upward. That's a really cool podcast. And I love what they're doing and engaging all types of leaders, different levels of government, levels of leadership. I love that podcast. The places that I go for thought leadership, I like to have my pulse on all the things, right? I can't just be on one side over here. I need to know what's going on so that I can be ready for whatever comes next in this nation. A few of my go-tos. So I like the Foreign Policy for America, Next in Foreign Policy. I like that podcast a lot because it's not just traditional. I like to hear what people are. It's good to know the established voices and what's established in terms of what our field brings. But I want to learn about the new ideas. What are the new concepts? What are new and innovative ways that folks are talking and thinking about this? So Next in Foreign Policy, thought leadership, at least in the DE&I space, you know, I've been closely following and tracking, you know, Chief Rita Sampson. She was the former Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, who was then has moved on to OPM and now a new opportunity as well. I like to see what, also Ambassador Jean Abercrombie Winstanley is another thought leader that I closely follow, who is transforming the State Department. I like to look at what other agencies and organizations are doing and how can that apply to the defense space or to, you know, other spaces that I'm involved or working with, because something that may work here may work over there. So I know that the Ambassador Gina Abercrombie Winstanley co-chaired a report with the Truman Center, how to reform the State Department, like with tangible examples. There's like, here's the example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which I highly recommend for folks who want to like read more, get new ideas, or learn more about the DEI work in our space across different fields. But I like to say I'm not only following thought leaders who are all at the top, right? To me, that's not the only one who can be a thought leader, right? Like those at my peer group can be a thought leader or coming with new ideas and new, bringing a different view and a different expertise, in my opinion. So vertical and horizontal thought leaders, for sure.
I agree. So David.
And also shameless plug for BPIA. We have a podcast, Black Professional and International Affairs. I'd be remiss to not also include our BPIA podcast, where we feature thought leaders across our field throughout different backgrounds, defense, intelligence, Congress, State Department, ambassadors too.
Yes, I have listened, and it is good. And I actually want to circle back to them. But I do have a comment and a question here from David Schiff. So he's going to check out your next foreign policy, and he says, thanks. Oh, it jumped. Hang on. Regarding inspiring the next gen, do you sometimes feel like, even when you talk to younger Americans, teens, that they believe that their capabilities and interests might be a good fit in the federal government? Do they feel like there's a pathway in? Do they seem to know about programs like the one NSIN has?
That's a really good question, and thank you for asking. At least from where I'm sitting, I can confidently say that the BPIA reach, they know what NSIN is, as well as WCAPS, our peer organizations, those who are working in the foreign affairs kind of community-based organization space and diversity organization space, are aware of the program and promote and share across our platforms. I think the challenge that all of us are having is how to step outside of our circles, outside of our usual suspects of, our outreach channels for foreign affairs and defense and military and things of that nature. So sometimes having to take kind of a creative approach or a non-traditional approach, stepping outside of DC, outside of Ivy League, the usual suspects, that's what I'll say, and potentially, working towards sharing outside of the usuals that we go to. But from where I'm sitting, NSIN does have a presence in a variety of different communities and spaces and ecosystems, right? I look at this like an ecosystem, right? You've got folks who are doing things in a lot of different places, doing a lot of different work, and trying to, at least where I see I'm trying to, is trying to help connect these pieces, connect these dots. I see we've got agency folks who are looking for talent. How can we connect them with direct pools and direct lines of talent, whether it's with BPIA or other, or WCAPS or YPFP, Young Professional Foreign Policy, these the community-based organizations in foreign affairs that make up our field. So, and I want to make sure that I answer the other questions here. Do you sometimes feel like when you're talking to younger Americans and teens, they believe their capabilities and interests might be a good fit?
That's the one I gave you.
For federal government, yeah.
I think, yeah.
So, we engage with high school and college age students with BPIA and myself on a personal level in different organizations. Right before I came to this call, I was on with the CSIS Bowie State group. They have a fellowship group. And I think that an important element of this question is remembering where we were at that age and what we were receptive to and what type of communication. So I try to be mindful of that. I have two younger teen siblings, and those are my guinea pigs. I'm always running things by them. I'm like, what's your opinion of what's happening in Russia? What's happening in Ukraine? Like, and they're, two regular teens, not, public school kid. And you'll be surprised at the level of awareness and understanding and ability that our young people have on these topics and on these things. What I find helpful, at least in the outreach that I do with high school and college students and my mentees, is trying to frame these things that may be normal for us, but abstract to them, what this actually looks like in terms of their skill set, right? If you're talking to high schoolers, talking about AI and STEM and innovate, it may go over some of their heads, bringing it down to a level that, a young person can understand. Not me saying, a young person, but that are younger, our youth can understand. How I like to frame it a little bit differently is applying the skills that we see, the transferable skills, into their everyday lives. So I'll have a classroom of high school students. I'll say, raise your hand who's the leader of their group, of your friend group? Who's the spokesperson of your group? right? Here's career options that may be a fit that you may want to explore down the line. Who's the person when you're in a club or in a group or in an organization, you like to handle the money. You calculate and handle the money. You like to handle that, you know, make sure everything is straight. You like to take the notes. You'd prefer to be less vocal, but like to take notes. Framing the skills, right? The analytical, the written, verbal communication skill, like those soft skill sets that are really important for our field, like framing it in a way that they can say, oh, I identify with that, I think is important and helpful. And do I feel like there's a pathway in? Mm-hmm. That's a good question. As someone who personally went through the federal government path and entry, and with the level of background that I have, all that I had to go through to be able to get in with the Department of Defense, I would find it slightly hard for others who may not, you know, they're seeing me who has all this stuff, the Forbes and blah, 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 all this stuff. And I'm having to like fight to get in, understand the system to get through, you know. So for the average everyday college student, it may be a little intimidating or confusing of what opportunities exist, if they're a fit, and what that looks like. So I'm really impressed and really proud of organizations like NSIN who are directly challenging that model and bringing in students and professionals who may not have the knowledge or the awareness to take the traditional federal government pathway in. So that's my response to that.
Well, thank you. I do have another question here. This is from Yongxuan Liu, and forgive me if I am not saying your name correctly. Hi, thank you for the great talk. I'm curious that a lot of efforts in building diverse environments sounds very intuitive and depends a lot on management. Is there an analytical tool when managing the diversity of teams? For analytical, I mean something like an algorithm or anything similar. I understand the issue of diversity will always be intuitive. I'm just wondering if current technologies may provide some help or reduce some of the overwhelming challenges. That's an interesting question.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
Mr. or Miss Liu, if you know of an algorithm that does do so, please let me know. Please let me know. You know, the challenges we're
So I see AI a little bit in this one.
Right. I was gonna say the challenges that we are working in we're discussing a topic or an issue that is largely human based, but we do see algorithm and analytical things that interact with human life all the time. Day-to-day.
Alexandria, she has her hand raised.
Yeah.
You want to jump in and say?
Yeah. So part of the reason I raised this question is because I'm recently working on a project about the diversity, and we are working on some graph-based algorithms about improving the diversity. I'm not sure if you know some of the graph algorithms. It's specifically built for managing the relationships between different agents in a big community. So that's why I'm asking if there's anything you can think of or any examples you can give in this field.
Yeah. And I may defer to that to Karen, who may have more guidance on it. I'm not aware of any particular AI or analytical. I would love to learn more if you're willing to share at a later date, you know, at a time offline, and to learn more about your research.
Yeah, I would love to learn more about it too, because, you know, I'm more on the human development and personal interaction side. So looking at an algorithm is probably on the opposite side of what I'm working with. Mm-hmm. And so no, I am not. Yep, thank you for your question. Thank you.
Just scanning the chat here for any other questions.
Same. I think I may have other questions. So what, when we look at the the international affairs, the geopolitical space, especially when we look at the crisis that is happening right now, from your aspect, from your point of view, as far as a contribution, as far as our efforts, as far as what we are doing, when we look at our efforts in national security, are we moving in the right direction? Do you feel as if we are making the right strides? What is your general consensus to say we still are making the right decisions, we are still going in the right direction, as far as you can see with your interactions? What is your view?
My answer will always be yes, we are going in the right direction, because we have folks like us who are here continuing to do that work and who will continue to do the work. So I see examples every day of folks, whether it's at NSIN, reaching out to historically Black colleges or diverse communities regularly, whether it's a BPIA or a WCAPS or a Diversity and National Security Network, right, at the community-based level, but also at the organizational level and at the agency level. I'm seeing that there's an intention to want to address these issues. Are they all at the pace that Alexandria would prefer them to be? Maybe not, but there's still an intention. So to me, that's in the direction of progress versus regression. So I do think that we're moving forward in progress. What will really tell the tale of time is what resources we're putting towards these efforts, and our leadership giving us a clear picture of what the end goal may look like. What are we even working towards? Sometimes we get so focused on the here and now. Okay, we got to recruit 20 people. We got to recruit 30 people from this group, that group, versus looking at what is the bigger picture of what we're trying to solve here. What would this look like in a perfect world, right? And then working backwards from there to say, okay, here's the 3 key elements you've identified: recruitment, retention, and a need for belonging, right? So those, and I'm happy to have the more in-depth conversations with it. I want to be respectful of our, event time here today. And not being afraid to ask hard questions. We cannot be afraid to ask these questions and speak truth to power, even if it makes others or ourselves feel uncomfortable. I'd rather have folks who are asking questions that may be uncomfortable questions, but are genuinely attempting to get us forward, move us forward in the direction of progress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me, or if you could just, share with me some of the more really profound experiences that you've had in your career that made you say, you know what, this is the best decision that I could have made.
There's been a few, but the one that's at the top for me is when I have, I'm getting a little teary-eyed thinking about it, but when my mentees, like my high school and my, undergraduate mentees come to me and say, Alex, I just got accepted to, this internship, or I finished my research project, just so excited about opportunities that they were like, we wouldn't have known about this if it wasn't for you. I don't think I would have, done these things if it wasn't for you or your support or the guidance. And that I'd give it all up if that could be, if I could, get to work in that kind of environment every day. And then just the opportunities of saying yes that have provided for me in terms of exposure. So an opportunity may present itself and I'm like, I don't know if this is a fit, or if this is a fit for my career, for my interest area or something like that, but still saying yes and saying, let me just give it a try. Let me just see if it's a fit. That's what's got me here today, is me saying, let's see, or yes to certain things. That's what's gotten me here, is saying yes and then following the thread.
That's awesome. Because I know there's some days when there are, you know, they're trying days and we're like, I wonder if this is the best thing that I could have done. And then we have those days where we're like, oh yeah, this is absolutely worth it. So, you know, having those successes with the students, I think that always says it all.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. All right, so do we have any other questions for Alexandria? You can submit them in the chat or you can raise your hand.
And don't be shy. Also, I see the note in here about X-Force and the algorithm. That's fascinating. I would love to hear and learn more. For anyone who has anything they'd like to share, I would love to learn. Mm-hmm.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to share?
I guess as a closing remark to share is to be graceful with ourselves, be gentle with ourselves in this work, because it can be heavy. Some of us are working on really heavy things, or in proximity to those heavy things. And we have to make sure that we're good before we can reach out and help anybody else in any kind of way. You know, when the airplane says you got to put your mask on before you can put the mask on somebody else, we have to make sure we have our mask on and that we're in a state of stability and kind of thriving, you know, that we're able to do this type of work, because it can be draining. It can be draining. It can be emotionally heavy. It can be emotionally heavy to have this conversation here today for some folks. So being gracious with ourselves and patient with ourselves, and knowing it's okay not to know, not to have the final end-all answer, because there is no final end-all answer. All we can do as leaders in our fields and with the sphere of influence that we have is do the best that we can with the information, the resources, and the proximity that we have in this work and any issue that we find to be important.
We do have one other question. For the cooperation challenges in building a diverse team, would you mind sharing a few examples on that?
Sure. So
Yeah.
I found that within my MPA, my focus is on, my specialization is on organizational design and systems thinking. So we had to do a lot of case studies in relation to teams, organizations. And we found that there's a lot of focus on the team itself in identifying and addressing challenges, which is important, but not as much of an emphasis on the training of the actual leader who has to lead that team. Because for any of those of us here who work in the defense space or are students in this space, and just being a human, we know sometimes conflict management, conflict resolution is not an innate, it's not something we're just born with a lot of the time, right? So really having someone who has some level of training, some level of ability to manage conflict, manage, opposing views to things in a way that builds an environment where folks feel safe to share those views, and that they feel heard, that the information is not, okay, you just say it and then that's it. Okay, no, okay, we're gonna go with this anyway. But that there was actual, there was some consideration there, some thought, some dialogue around it. And then, that takes into account the, decision that may need to be made. So I don't know if that answers your question, and I'm happy to kind of speak more on it. Yeah, cooperation challenges when building a diverse team, sharing a few examples on that, right? And I think the important thing is for us as individuals and professionals to know that, and many of us do get it, right? but that other views don't take away from our view all the time. I mean, there's certain situations and cases where we have to be, professional and mindful, but others having opinions on things isn't always necessarily directed to, or personalized towards another individual. And having a view of how we approach these situations, how we approach the conflict or the difference in views, the opinions, I think is a fundamental part of this conversation on recruiting and retaining, because in ways it can be considered human nature that folks may feel more comfortable speaking to someone who's like them, whether it's we look alike or we sound alike or we speak alike or we think alike. Understanding our individual unconscious biases and bias on these things. So I hope that helps. Right. I see, and then this will be the last question that I take, Karen. I don't know what you think, because we're at 5:24.
We're good. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
From Trish, who was the first person that really convinced you? And I think this is what the question is, but please correct me if this is wrong, but who convinced you to rise the ranks? What was that moment like? And Trish, you can clarify if I'm capturing your question correctly.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It might have been a fat finger in the chat. So I remember really clearly, the person that opened doors for me and looked me in the eye and said, like, Trish, you're going to really crush it in your career. This is going to be amazing. I've got your back. I'm going to put wind in your sails. And I mean, I remember that particular conversation, and I remember working with him in a way that just is so powerful to me. So I guess I'm just asking for you to kind of, share that moment in your career. There was probably either one person or one conversation that you were like, you know what, I'm going to crush it. And this person helped me see it. And I was just, maybe wondering if that was as powerful for you as the moment was for me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your question. That's a beautiful question. So I'd say that person for me was Chief Rita Sampson. So she was the one who originally got me into the defense space. I met her at a conference connected to an internship that I did, a fellowship with, while I was a fellow with the White House Initiative for Historically Black Colleges. And I was just enamored by this woman. Her ability to move and mobilize, things at such a large scale really inspired me. And I wanted to learn. I said, I want to be like you when I grow up. What does it take? And she's like, so you really want to know, huh? And from there, she really took me by the hand and helped teach me so much about this field and about how to be a professional in this space and what it means to be, an authentic leader, what it means to lead with conviction and lead in service to others. Originally, my connection with her, I was doing my MPA research, my final research project on DE&I efforts, applying systems thinking to the foreign affairs space. And I just asked her, I said, I'm working on this research paper, and I need to know what I'm learning in theory, if it is actually applicable in practice. Like, is this what you've seen in the industry and in the field at large with your experience? She's had a lot of different experiences. But the fact that someone so high profile, and it doesn't even have to be high profile like that, but the fact that someone or a leader and a woman would take the time. I can't imagine how busy she was now. Like, I'm busy now and I'm a senior membership manager. Like, so at a chief level, how busy, and she would always make time, whether it's, I wouldn't bombard her, right? It may be a monthly phone call, or I'd be able to go visit her in office once every few months. But just the willingness, when you don't have to say yes, when you do say yes to someone. Another one who is currently a mentor of mine is the president and CEO of the Truman Center, Jenna Ben Yehuda, taking me right by the arm and said, so you want to learn how to be a leader? Let's go. Let's go. Let's put your money where your mouth is. You say you want to learn, we're going to teach you. So I'm thankful for that, because it's teaching me how to pull others up as I move forward. Like even where I am now, I feel like we are all in a position to pull someone else up. I don't care if you're, a ninth grade student, you can pull up a middle schooler. Okay. You can pull up the sixth grader with you. And it helps to create these kind of full circle moments when you're thinking about your journey and the journey of someone else, the ability that we have and our story might have to impact someone else. And sometimes we got to remember not to downplay our own story and our own journey and our own perspectives to those who are coming up behind us. So thank you for asking that question. And again, Karen, it was such an honor to be here to speak with you and with NSIN and the guests who are here today. I look forward to continuing to watch the work that you all are doing and help support it, at least for my seat with BPIA and Truman National Security Project, all the work that you all do. So I applaud you all and thank you so much for having me here to speak today.
Alexandria, my friend, and now all of our friend, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time. It was great. Learned a lot. Thank you.